So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Thanks for being with us today. It's a pleasure to have you here, and it's a pleasure to have here also Mr. Jorge Batalles from Spain. Today, Ms. Jorges will tell us about sustainable soil management in salt-affected lands for reducing toxicity and boosting crop production. I will now pass him the floor as chairperson of the International Network of Salt-Affected Soils of the FAO, under the umbrella of the Global Soil Partnership, and as chair of the International Union of Soil Sciences Commission on Salt-Affected Soils. So, Mr. Batalles, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lucrecia. Excellencies, academic and research authorities, and dear colleagues, greetings from Valencia. I am grateful to be invited to deliver some ideas about the salt-affected soils and the possible toxicities that appear mainly in those soils. And I advance to you that some aspects are complex. We can give some guiding rules, but some problems they need for a very elaborate research. This is the difficulty for some some aspects. But in general, I think that I can give you an idea about the panorama in general. And well, allow me to share my screen. Kindly confirm me that it is visible.
Yes, we can see.
Thank you. Well, the webinar was named Sustainable Soil Management in Salt-Affected Lands. That's a challenging aspect. And as subtitle, Reducing Toxicity and Boosting Crop Production. And the aim of the webinar is introduce the problem of toxicity in salt-affected soils, present management practices, and as well support countries in managing salt-affected soils. So I prepared some ideas here, but let's get conscient of the problem. Salinity is a very subtle degradation process that affects soils and affects, especially it is costly, that affects such soils that are irrigated and those soils that have a high input of fertilizers, water, and other means and devices to make production. So the problem is increasing, and the state, by the figures that FAO give to us, also extracted from documents and from the global report on soil salinity that we have produced in the network, you can see that it is a huge extent in the world. Some authors have made a study about the progression of the salinization. We should distinguish in between salinity, that is a natural process and status of some areas and soils, and the salinization, that is a degradation process that affects soils. And we usually measure or estimate the problem in measuring the electrical conductivity of the saturated base extract. And then some authors have made studies estimating that the water salinity, in this case, that is applied to soils as being increased its electrical conductivity quite worldwide. You can see there the figures. When we speak about salinity, we cannot split this talk from the water, because salinity is mostly using the vector of water for affecting the soils, and as well it is the possibility to remove the salts from the soil using waters. And then the water availability as well as the water use of the system, I mean precipitation and as well evapotranspiration of the soils. It is closely related to the climate. And then if we take the most recent report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that provides regular assessment of the scientific basis of climate change, impacts and future risk, and as well giving and suggesting options for adaptation and mitigation, we can have some projections that now we are 1.1 degree centigrade warmer than in the 1850 to 19 years. And it is, according to the projections, it is possible that we have much more warming, and this warming, as the figure shows, will produce an annual mean total soil moisture change that it is deficitary in the most of the cases, more irregular precipitations that will difficult the use of the water, and as well increase the temperature that will increase the evapotranspiration. So the forecast for such systems at risk of salinization is that this problem will be increased, and that's why it is important to understand the problem. Salinity, it is one status of some of the very beautiful and wonderful landscapes in the world. I usually refer to the Anna Karenina principle and the health. Now the new paradigm of speaking about soils is the health of soils, and we can apply that to salt-affected soils. And this principle is included at the start of the novel of Leo Tolstoy that is named Anna Karenina, that starts with all happy families are alike. I mean, in harmony. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. It means that when the system is disturbed, the problems become diverse. But we have such beautiful and wonderful landscapes that are natural and that are named primary salinity, that are results of geochemical processes along the landscape or at the coastline, both coastline or inland. And we should wonder about how these organisms, especially plants and microorganisms, are surviving in such harsh environment. And now that we face difficulties in the production of food for supply to increasing humanity, is that we should take some lessons from the systems, because in the genetic aspects, they are actually a wealth, invaluable wealth. Speaking about soils, if we use the taxonomies existing, soil taxonomy or the FAO World Reference Basis or Russian or Chinese, there are very detailed specifications of the aspects related to salinity, but all these classifications require that some horizons have a high concentrations of salts and a development of several centimeters, and they differ in this, and the product of the electrical conductivity by the depth of the horizon or layers affected should match some levels. And we find this natural saline soils. Saline soil, as we will mention later, it is when has a high electrical conductivity, but not high pH, you can see in the profile silver nitrate that was dropped there, and this is evidencing the chloride's presence, and as well the red line is for some reducing aspects. And the sodic soils are such soils that are low in electrical conductivity, but high in the exchange concentrations in the exchange complex for sodium, and this produce dispersion of the clays, and usually natric horizons, as it is shown in the upper part of this slide, appears, and the lower part it is the dispersed soil, because when the pit was opened, the water table dropped. You can have this combination of these two, and you can have as well sodic soils that are saline. I mean that the sodium concentration in the exchange complex is very high, and the concentration in the solution of the salinity is as well high. And we can have as well, and I think that it is interesting for some crops, these saline soils that are as well organic. What affects plants' growth in salt-affected soils? Well, the figure shows the response of the plants and the growth at the left on the water availability in the soil system, pore system, and at the right we can see the yield production in percent that it is obtained when the electrical conductivity increase. And most plants have a threshold value of electrical conductivity that start to produce difficulties in the plants growing, and then the yield is decreased. And it is approximated by a stray light, but usually it is not such pattern, but has some variations and intervals for different crops. And it is important to state here that when we measure electrical conductivity of the saturated past, we are estimating the osmotic pressure. But the osmotic pressure is not only the result of the ions dissolved, that I'm speaking about salts, but as well as other compounds that are polar and can be dissolved in water, and for example, some saccharose will increase the osmotic pressure, but not the electrical conductivity. And as well, this is just a picture of an equilibrium. And this electrical conductivity do not inform by itself about the total amount of salts that a soil has. And using this approach that was presented by Maas and Hoffman researchers in the 70s, we can try to classify different vegetables and crops according to their sensitivity to the electrical conductivity. And so we have from very sensitive, like oranges or beans, to the less sensitive, more tolerant as asparagus or sugar beet, as well dates and so on. And it is important to remind that, because when a system increases its salinity, we should remind that maybe if our crop is not suitable by now, it can be substituted by another one that is more tolerant. And there exists a lot of tables telling about the different salinity sensitivity of the different crops. But it is a tricky point, this, when because where we measure the electrical conductivity and how it is management, because all plants show different sensitivity to salinity along their development stage. So some strategies can be adopted for avoiding the negative effect of salinity. And the total abiotic stress that a plant can suffer comes not only from hydric stress and the osmotic stress, as we mentioned, but there are as well toxic stress because of the ions and compounds dissolved in the soil solution that can affect the plant, interfering in their metabolic paths. The thermal stress that not all plants can live in any place because of the temperature, external temperature and soil temperature. Of course, nutritional stress, we know that very well about this fertilization. And in the cases of that the soil is flooded permanently or in periodic time, it is appear as well a redox stress. And if you add to this total abiotic stress, the biotic stress that can appear, for example, by pericularia or other problems, microbial or bacterial or birds or different kind of plagues. So really agriculture is a challenging activity. Well, we spoke about saline soils, but we can speak about salt-affected soils. What happens with salinity, salinization, is that the unadverse condition can appear in a soil just after one irrigation event if we use brackish or saline water. And that's why we use the term of salt-affected soils that are not so, in general, we are focused to agriculture, and those soils do not have so huge concentrations of salts that we have in the soils that I presently formerly. And as a rule of thumb, that should be careful recurred to it when studying particular problem. We can classify the soil saline sodic or saline sodic according to the electrical conductivity of the saturation past extract and the sodium absorption ratio. That means it is the ratio in between sodium and the balance in calcium magnesium into the soil, that it is referring to the problems of clay stability. And we can use instead of SAR the ESP and as well of the pH and the different effects, negative effects that appear mainly in different soils. For saline is osmotic stress and producing reduced growth of the plant. With sodic, we have such a particular effect that is degrading structure, and you can have an acidic soil that when it is dry, it is hard like a stone, and when it is moist, it is dispersed that you can even not walk over this. And the saline sodic soils have take the two problems, toxicity and structural issues as well. Why it is soil salinization expanding worldwide? And it is because of very different mismanagement practices. The first slide is presenting a problem of developing salinity because irrigation with brackish and saline water in that area of central Spain. Second slide is cacao production in Ecuador and over a sediment geologic layer that has phosphorus salts there, and they are remobilized after irrigation. We will speak about salt-tolerant plants and the saline agriculture, but an improved management of the irrigation can as well lead to the high salinization of the system, making it less useful. In Thailand, I learned during one of my visits that the saline water, groundwater, raised up after limiting the natural pumping of the forest that was removed, and then the salinity arrived to the surface from a geologic layer. And as well, drainage of salt-affected lands had to be transformed to agriculture, inherit some of the salts there, and in this case, maybe close to the sea water has some problems for managing this, and the low, high in report to the sea level. And of course, we are speaking about climate change, and it is all projections speak about sea level rise, and then this will produce marine intrusion and coastal aquifers intrusion, and especially if these coastal aquifers are overexploited, so for irrigation, and so the salts from the sea will be spread over the soils. So secondary salinization is often the result of wrong management, and that's why it is so important a correct management. I will show you two examples from Spain. This is an area in central Spain that formerly it was a wetland, and it is connected, this area, with another wetland that nowadays is national park, that is Tablas de Daimiel, and the rivers that are passing by, they are brackish waters, and then it was decided to transform this for cropping, and you can see the patterns of the pivot and the linear irrigation systems that has spread salt over the soil. The red is chlorophyll activity, but the white it is salts. And this use of the water as well has an indirect effect, not indirect, direct effect on the wetland that is downwards of the course of the river that has been desiccated, and this wetland that had peat, this peat has been aerated, and then intense fires appear by the combustion, spontaneous combustion of the peat. And in this case, the management it is not only a matter of farmers fighting against salinization, but it is, I think, a matter of the watershed authorities that should regulate the use of water and the wise use of the water according to their composition. Another problem, it is here at the Delta River of Spain, like other deltas, is in regression because of the use of the water and the dams constructed upwards of the course of the river, and then if the arrival of sediments is quite stopped, and then the sea starts to erode. But also some storms have led to the flooding and of these areas, and you can see the electrical conductivity on these fields that are paddy fields. So it is rice what is cropped there, and so in some fields the yield is quite very low and difficult to get, and so it is a particular problem because of this aquatic flooding conditions, and we will refer to this later. And in this case, it is a matter of farmers fighting against that in cooperative. And I refer formerly to these natural landscapes, and so we can learn from halophytes. So it is amazing how halophytes can survive, and as well microorganisms. You can see at the left an aquatic flooded system, and you can see the zoning of the different halophytes according to the salinity that they find, and as well of the reduction stress that appears. And at the right, you can see a slope catena of different degrees of salinity, and plants, different type of plant species adapting to this gradient of salinity. So plants as well know about the salinity, and they adopt the position according to their tolerance. So we can learn a lot of them. And this should be used for improving our crops. And it is a big effort in trying to make genetic modifications of some of the crops to make them resistant to the different abiotic stresses, and especially in salinity. And this is an experimental field at the Delta Ebro with different plots testing for different type of rice, and including modified grass, modifying rice, and as well different conditions of the soil and salinity. And they get very interesting experience and data to know how to deal with this, because we know that this problem is increasing. It could be useful for the attendance of the meeting to check about this database that is a database of halophytes, but not only of halophytes, as well as for other salt-tolerant plants, that is called eHaloph, and is freely to be consulted. And those that keep this database up to date, they register articles and taking data from different data from tolerance, from germination, and well, it deserves that you approach this database if you have a project dealing with the risk of salinization of your soil. In salt-affected soils, we have some ionic species that are a matter of concern. It is not only a matter of the osmotic pressure that they produce, but as well about their toxicity in interfering some metabolic paths. And especially chloride, it is very, and sodium, they are interfering in the metabolism of plants. Sodium, you know that it replaces potassium in the ionic pumps, and chloride has different aspects. Boron as well. You know, boron tolerance, it is a very, very narrow quantity in between what is deficiency and what is toxicity. In some of the salt-affected soils, especially in those that are submerged, and for some crops like rice, aluminium problems can arise, and I will refer to this later. And less concentrated, but as well very, very dangerous, is the possibility of having cadmium and arsenic concentrations in the soil that can pass to the plants. It is well known that, for example, arsenic, it is passed to the rice crops, and so it is there are later for preparing the cooking that washing this for removing the arsenic. But as well, we should consider the biocides that have a half-life in the soil that could be important, and that affect the health of the soils, because affecting some microorganisms. And nowadays we should consider as well emerging pollutants, because we are using wastewaters that many times come from cities and from it is tried to avoid from industries, because it is known that usually they have heavy metals. But in the cities, you know that we use medicaments. We are using antibiotics and other medicaments, and so it could be it passed through the water, and even after some depuration stages in the water plant treatments, and then they can arrive to the farmer. Actually, for dealing with some of the toxicities, we should consider a very complex framework, because we have the soil, but we have as well connection of the soil with the waters, the irrigation water, and groundwater. Because if something bad happens in the soil and we remove it, this will move to the leaching fraction and the groundwater, and this can impact in another place. And there are perturbances or alteration of the system, because the human activity and the change in the atmosphere, as well the growing of plants, so the biosphere. But if we focus into the soil, we have the solid phase is constituted of inorganic soils, and as well in many soils organic matter is important. And these two fractions have the possibility of reaction, especially of chelation in the case of the organic matter and the cation exchange and in the inorganic fraction, especially in the most fine fraction that are clays. And they interact with the soil water, and that is in the pore system. And these processes can be desorption, sorption, mineralization, precipitation, and as well including redox reactions, and of course speciation changes, even biological transformation, how it happens with nitrogen and other compounds. So we should consider what is the specific conditions of the soil that we are considering, because this problem is complex. And I think that one of the main aspects that we should consider is the mineralogy of the soil. The clays fraction is referred as the most responsible fraction of the chemical interaction with the soil solution into the soil. And the reason is that because they are very fine particles, and it means that they offer a high reaction surface. And organic matter as well has low molecular weight, and can be, well, we have different compounds, higher molecular weight and lower molecular weight, but they both are very rich in reacting terminals, I mean carboxylic acids and phenolic and methyl and so on. And if we take a look to this, I put there 3 slides. One on the top is kaolinite, that is very frequent in soils, and you can see ordered crystals, but very well formed. It is a special case. It is not always so well ordered and so well formed, but it is to give you the idea of what happens. And in the middle, we have a mixture of illite and mica, and in the bottom part we have smectite. And you can see that the surface, it is maximum in the case of smectite, and this is one of the reasons of that they are very active in the soils and very sensitive to the problems. But if you go to the top, and you can see that the surface, the basal surface of this arrangement of crystals, it is low compared with the lateral. And you can see in the case of kaolinite, that is interesting, has a layer in the structure that is oxydrils. But the smectite and others are called minerals 2 to 1. They have only oxygens in the external layers, but the kaolinite has hydroxyls in one layer and oxygens in another one, and this makes different a kaolinite from others. We can take a look about the different families of minerals, and these minerals present because of the defective formation. Some of the places that should be occupied by silicon are occupied usually by aluminium, and some of the places that are usually occupied by aluminium could be occupied by magnesium. Well, with all this arrangement, it happens that that it's called isomorphic heterovalent substitution inside the crystal. Finally has an external effect that these crystals have electrical field. Usually it is negative field, and then they attract cations external cations to compensate there. And we mentioned the cation exchange capacity reported to the mass of these minerals, and you can see that kaolinite is low because it has not quite chairs. It is quite perfect. But the smectite and vermiculite, especially, they have very high cation exchange. And they have as well a very high surface offering for reactions. And the smectids and vermiculites are expansible. That means when they are dry, they have lower dimension than when they are wetted, that water enters into the layer and then it expands. And the dependency of the charge because of the pH, it makes a big difference as well with kaolinite, because having this hydroxyl layer, and then it can be dissociated because of the pH alkaline, and then developing negative extra charge. And it is minor in the case of smectite and vermiculite. So it results in the colloidal activity of this kaolinite activity is colloidal activity is low, but smectite is extremely high, and for the vermiculite it is medium. So in general, cation exchange, it is simplified system. It can be because many aspects appear here, but salinization is a matter of cation exchange, and then you have two examples. In the first one, it is sodium chloride that makes salinization, and so the clays exchange their, for example, calcium for sodium, and then the calcium is passed to solution, and this calcium and chloride are soluble and can be removed from the soil by leaching. And in the case of the sodium arriving as well, but in the case of the carbonates, sodium carbonate, the result of releasing calcium, it is that calcium carbonate is formed and precipitated after the cation exchange. And it happens that some already salinized soils by hydrolysis can lead to high alkalinization, and it is a problem that was found many years ago, trying to reclaim such soils. And the correction of this is using some source of rich calcium that finally replace the sodium again for calcium, and gives us soluble compounds like sodium and sulfates that can be leached out of the soil. Referring to the systems that are underwater and are flooded, and especially if they are at the coastline, let's remember that seawater has main composition is chloride, followed by sodium in quite equal concentration, then around 10 times less sulfates, and magnesium in the same amount of sulfate. And it is relatively rich in boron, that because boron it is quite only noticeable in natural way in volcanic landscapes, and but as well seawater can have a concentration of boron that can affect later the crops. And then in these soils, let's remember that if we have a system or components that are in the oxidized state, they can pass to the reduced state using electrons, taking electrons and protons, and they pass to their reduced state. It is important to remember that, because the reduction always, the reductive conditions always reduce the protons concentration. That means the pH. So it is very difficult to have a very reduced system that is high acidic, because this reduction takes these protons for passing to the reduction state and making water. And so at the coastline with the sulfates, they can be reduced to hydrogen sulfide, but as well ferric oxides that are in the soil are reduced to from iron 3 to iron 2, and they can form different minerals. That is a series that terminal mineral is the pyrite. You can see there those octaheders of pyrite and this frambohedre that is formed by this octahedra and cube of pyrite. But in the reduction as well, because it is promoted by the sulfovibro, and in presence of organic matter, if there is no organic matter, the reduction it is low. But if it happens, then biological activity produce CO2, and in a system that as well has sodium, the CO2 rises to the surface, and you can find in the surface alkaline conditions because of this formation of sodium bicarbonate or sodium carbonate. And in this stage, you can see that pyrite has a pK of around 32, and that means that is absolutely not soluble. But apart of the iron, we can put here many heavy metals that are sequestered as well and precipitating with pyrite in this case. But what if we try to reclaim or we alter the system and making some drainage? Then we will pass to a different environment that is reiterated and drained soil, so the air enters into the system where the water was, and then oxidation starts. And in this case, referring to the pyrite, this Thiobacillus ferrooxidans. Well, there are several series of microorganisms, but it is main activating this. And then this pyrite, it releases sulfuric acid, and the sulfuric acid destroys the clays there and forms a series of minerals called jarosite. And this jarosite, it is there specified as iron, but it could be as well aluminium, ammonium, and potassium. And so it is a series of composition, has not a particular composition, depending on the system. Just in the case of that the system has a huge storage of calcium carbonate, this sulfuric acid released, it is neutralized and formed by gypsum is formed. You can have there the picture of jarosite with some crystals of gypsum that are acicular, and down you can see the electron microscope that you can find together such crystals of gypsum, but as well with rhomboids that are transforming. So this, in the case of the drainage of such systems, we can, if the system is polluted, we can speak about in terms of chemical time bomb. I mean, so these metals are released, and in this acidic environment, they are very soluble and very mobile, and they can impact around. And this could be as well releasing aluminium that increase acidity because of the hydrolysis, and 1 mole of aluminium produce 3 moles of protons that impact the system. So it's a bad idea to drain such systems. Well, how we characterize the soil properties and salinity of course, we should characterize the soil profile, the full profile when possible, making a pit and recognizing different layers, and we can recognize the fluxes of matter. And as well, we can make several field tests that tell us about the reduction conditions, the presence of chlorides, the presence of sulfides, and so on. Of course, soil sampling by making a pit or even augering in some cases, and then come the laboratory determination that include analysis of physical and chemical properties and mineralogy of each horizon. And later it is made the saturation path extract of every horizon. And it is important because salinity has a high variation in time. It is not the same in raining time that in dry time, and as well in spatial pattern. it is a good idea to use some tools available like this electromagnetic induction method to assess the spatial and temporal variation of the salinity.
Jorge, sorry for interrupting you. Because we are almost through 1 hour, can you maybe get to the end? I don't mean to rush it, but I would like to save some time for questions. Thanks.
Yes. Well, just to mention that there are several tools now that we can use for that. And irrigation should be always designated using models. And there are many models that consider the interaction of the water and chemicals into the soil. And this, so you can optimize the crop irrigation using models in case of risk of salinization. And you need some input data, and the models will run and give you a possibility. And if it is acceptable, then you have this design. And these models give you some isochrones for different. And they allow management optimization and can be used as well for scenarios analysis before making anything into the soil. And the salinization threat, how to act at different scales. At global scale, reduction of gas emissions that contribute to global warming, and invest in gathering better knowledge on salt-affected status. At national and international scale, development of adoption of policies, that is very important, that regulate the conservation of natural saline ecosystems, promote technological innovation, and at watershed scale, holistic approach to water sources management, considering hydrological connections with water quality change impact on soils and aquifers. Farm scale, to be aware of the importance of the salinization, explore alternative for the use of the irrigation water, adopt such sustainable irrigation practices based on the leaching, based on the models, select on crops adapted to existing salinity conditions, as well as the adequate fertilization and at the time needed for and the amendments needed for correct some of the problems of in the toxicity in the soils, and assessment of these possible specific toxicities for neutralize them. Just for finishing, we as it is promoted by different sessions of the COP, salinity and climate smart agriculture is mentioned, and we are promoting from our network the United Nations Year of Saline Agriculture in 2021. And you know already our network and the webinars and the report that was released, and there are very amazing numbers there. Thank you for your attention. And
thanks to you, we give you a virtual applause. Really, thank you. It was so comprehensive and enlightening. I'm very sorry that, that I had to cut you short, but because
time is time.
I want to give some space also to questions, because we already have some in the chat. So maybe I will start asking you the questions of our participants. The first one is, what is the kilograms in the ESR equation?
Excuse me.
I think this is, well, kilogram, maybe you can go back.
You mean the
ESR equation?
No, it is not kilogram, sorry, it is Gapon coefficient. It is kg, Gapon coefficient. That is, it is experimental constant for the soil in particular, and it relates what you measure, because for measuring what is sodium activity, and you refer to you have two ways to approach.
Yes.
One is analyzing the extract of the saturated paste, and in this case you are measuring SAR, sodium absorption ratio. And if you in this way you can approach the exchangeable sodium percentage that is harder to measure. It can be measured as well, and there exists a relation in between these two. And this Kg it is an experimental equation that refers to the particular clays and that relates this, that is the sodium absorption ratio, to the exchangeable sodium ratio. So it is not kilogram, it is a constant of Gapon. Gapon is our researcher.
Thank you very much. Maybe I see hands up, so let me allow some of our participants to take the floor. I will start with Shine Nongsuba. You are now allowed to talk, please, if you want to take the floor. Shine Nongsuba, yes.
Hello, thank you for a wonderful presentation. Well, the presentation was very interesting and meaningful. I don't have a question as yet. I was just impressed and I found it very informative. Thank you for the floor. Yeah, I'll give others an opportunity to ask questions if they do have some. Thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, it's Farnaz Saleki.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Do you hear me?
Yes.
I had just a question about the sodic soils. What's the best way to improve our sodic affected soils quality except?
You are asking about what is the effect of the sodic soils?
Yes. I want to ask you a question about the sodic soils. What's the best way to reduce and also improve our sodic soils quality? And also to reduce the toxicity in such soils, because we have this problem in our country, and also I forgot to say my name. I'm Farnaz, and for PhD candidate student. Thank you. I want to hear your advices. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Well, as I advanced you, problem we can give general orientations, but it is for accurate solutions. The soil system should be, as a whole, should be investigated. But as a rule, for the sodic soils, the solution and the correction is using compounds that release calcium, and then the calcium, it is exchanged in the clay, and sodium is released, and then it should be accomplished with the leaching, because you must keep out the sodium that is released. This is in general, and the most used amendment is calcium. But in such, there are sodic soils that are really difficult if they have as well. They have smectites, and they are cracking and expanding, and so, and especially those that are called vertisols. And it is a matter, because in vertisols, for example, this application will not probably keep on surface, but it will drop off as well into the cracks of the soil, and so it is other approach should be taken, maybe using solutions, or it's case by case. It is a matter of giving more accurate info. As well, always increasing the organic content of the soils. It is always a good idea, even using green manure, even using charcoal, even using peat or other amendments. It is good because it increases the all properties of the soil. I mean, the physical properties, the chemical properties, and the infiltration, and the cation exchange, and the biological activity, and so on. But some of them, they are expensive at a large scale.
Thank you, Jorge. Let me take this one from the chat. The pH of saline sodic soils is very high, no, above 8.5. probably the crops like rice may face micronutrients deficiency. How do we manage this problem to improve rice growth yield?
Well, as I mentioned in the rice, excuse me by the browsing up forth and back, but I need it. In the paddy soils that are submerged inside the soil, the pH is close to neutrality because of the reduction. You can have in this in the paddy soils, you can recognize the presence of sulfides by an easy field test. Just take hydrochloric acid and drop into the soil, and you immediately will notice an unpleasant odor because it is the release of the sulfuric acid. So it tells you there are other more elaborated tests, but this is easy. And it means that inside the soil, it is quite immobilized, and the alkalinity only appears on surface. And I think that it is quite not well. It is not. It's on surface, and it does not affect the crop, and because the soil is stable. And for the rice soils, the paddy soils, consider that all that we tell about this electrical conductivity and the soil saturated paste, so rice quite growth on the soil saturated paste, even a bit more water of the soil saturated paste. And so when we measure this electrical conductivity, we directly, if we have the means to extract the water from the soil, there is quite no need of making the soil saturated paste because it is what plant finds. And with these soils that are flooded, this salinization adds a problem, gives an additional problem because usually salts are removed by leaching. And so paddy soils usually try to make an impermeable layer below the crop, and for using less water that do not enter. And so leaching should be done in lateral by flush surface or bilateral drainage in some fields. And this is the way you have a system that is polluted, and you want to keep all pollutants out of there. And so leaching is one of the musts. And then you can adding some amendments that neutralize the pollutants, and as well to neutralize make them immobile.
Thank you. If everyone is fine with it, I would like to ask you some 10 minutes more because I see many questions and also many hands up. My suggestion is that we give the floor to the 4 people that still have their hands up, and then we address the remaining questions in the Q&A by email. We can send you together with the copy of the presentation and the link to the video recording, the answer to all the questions that you are raising in the Q&A. So let me give the floor to KF Chin. You are now allowed to talk, please. We can hear you. Hello? KF Chin? Okay, let me go to Eduardo Costantini, please.
Hello, good morning. Nice to hear and see you, Jorge. And my question is related to the cause of salinizations. I think that you should also mention erosion, in the sense that many soils form on marine sediments, especially inland, not only along the coast, can suffer from salinity when you have a strong erosion stripping the surface horizon and letting the underlying horizons outcrop. And this is especially true for crops like tree crops, when you have a slope reshaping by machinery, earth movement, and so you can have the outcropping of a saline horizon, and this can increase the acreage of salt-affected soils in many parts of the world. Thank you. I want your comment on that.
Buongiorno, Eduardo. Thank you for your comments. And well, you are right. There are many aspects dealing with, and it is short time. And the moderator did her best to keep me in order in time. And well, it is well known that to mention that because the source of the vector of the salinization, it is water. Usually, salt-affected soils are found in the bottom areas, and in slope areas, it is difficult to have such salt-affected soils, except if these are really sediments that are fossil salts, and then you can have a local source. But what development of soils having salinity usually are found in the bottom parts of the topography. And but you are right for mentioning this erosion, and it is well known. For example, in the United States, in the Imperial Valley, they have a big problem, not only of the salinity, but as well when the soils are dry, the winds are transporting salts, but not only salts, but selenium and arsenic by dust particles moving to another places, and so moving not only the problem of salinity, but as well of toxicity. That is very, very important. And so really because it is dealing with closely related to water and the management, the salinity has different aspects and approaches to deal with. Thank you for your suggestion and to include this comment.
Thanks indeed. Now we go to Dharmesh Verma, and after that, Pete Nell. And with this, we will close the webinar. Dharmesh, please, over to you.
Well, thanks, Lucrezia. Quite impressive presentation Professor George has made today. We have also worked here in India. We are having a huge area and salt-affected lands. And with the help of World Bank, we conducted an on operational level and reclaimed almost 7 lakh hectares of land and could bring farmers to improved economic life. But suddenly, after 5 years, we found that with the high groundwater level in our area, many areas, it started emerging again with the resodicity. And basically, it is a salt-affected soils with salinity and sodicity both. I would like to know now, because it has been a 20 years project and it has been already concluded. But yes, since I have been a part of this project, I would like to a comment from Professor George. What can be the reason why the resodicity emerged and some of the areas, have emerged under this? And my second query is, he was talking about gypsum and some clarification on gypsum. He was talking something I couldn't understand.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions. And well, it is for some farmers is an unexpected problem, the water table rise, because the deep drainage moves salt downwards. But when water finds an impermeable layer, it starts to grow up, and there's phreatic layer and can arrive to the surface. As I mentioned in the slide from Thailand, they got this problem in this case of Thailand because they have salt mines, and so they have salt layers, the geological layers, and then they had over a forest that was acting as a biological pumps of this water, keeping the water table low and not arriving to the root zone. And after deforestation, the problem started to appear. And it is in the case of risk of the water table raise, it is improved care should be put to the drainage, and maybe some lines of some of the salt-resistant, salt-tolerant trees that can pump up water and can use by evapotranspiration, can help to drop the water table layer. And regarding the use of gypsum, gypsum is not the only source of calcium, and it is in some cases, like this is on the screen. It is probably not only the best solution. Could be in this case the solution could be to apply for correct this acidity, to correct calcium oxide and other forms. Excuse me. And gypsum is not always available, and price is not always affordable. And it is mainly well suited just for because sulfate is quite not toxic. It is for exchanging the cations, the sodium absorbed, and then the sodium released can be leached, and that's why it is used traditionally gypsum. But other forms of calcium, especially calcium oxide, it is as well useful, and has as well the advantage of calcium oxide that it transforms immediately when mixed with water. It transforms to hydroxide and then raise the pH, and then at a high pH, many metals, heavy metals, are immobilized as hydroxides.
Okay, thank you, Professor George.
Thank you very much. And we lost the last hands up. So I think this was all for today. Once again, many thanks, Dr. Bataille Sales. As promised, I hope we can answer the remaining questions. We have quite some, like 10 questions in the Q&A still to be answered. My hope is that we can answer them offline and send them together with the copy of the presentation and the video recording of this webinar to all participants. With this, thanks again. Thank you all. And we hope to see you at the next webinar. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the participants. I felt very honored.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.